Okay, today of course is Chav Cheshvan, 20th of Cheshvan, birthday of the Rebbe Rashab, the fifth Chabad Rebbe, Rabbi Sholom Dovber. As Michael mentioned this morning, he is most notable for founding Tomchei Temimim, the Chabad Yeshiva. The Rebbe Rashab said that it took him 10 years of davening at the oils of his predecessors, the previous Chabad Rebbe, going to their oil him to decide to make Tomchei Temimim. That's how weighty it was. The decision took him 10 years to think about it.
So 1903, right? Or 1905?
When he founded it?
Yeah. So it was 1903.
What would be the Hebrew date? That would be Tafresh Samach Daled. I think it was a little bit earlier. 1900 would be Tafresh Samach. 1900 Tafresh Samach. So I think it's a little bit earlier. Maybe it's a little bit earlier. I don't remember exactly.
We'll find out.
Yeah, at any rate, and he explained why he founded the Chabad Yeshiva. So initially, till then, you learned wherever you learned, and then, if you were older and you were holding at that level, you learned Chassidus. But Rebbe Rashab wanted to create a yeshiva where the study of Chassidus is integrated in a systematic way, in the same way you learn Gemara, Halacha, and you progress from one level to the next in your yeshiva years. Same should be for learning Chassidus. It should be in a progress that you're learning it like you do any other subject in Torah. So even within the Chabad mind frame, the idea of Chassidus being a subject of Torah like any other subject in Torah is really the Rebbe Rashab's accomplishment, one of the Rebbe Rashab's accomplishments through Tomchei Temimim, through the founding of the yeshiva. And in explaining why he was doing this, so this is all happening at the same time while the Enlightenment movement is making great strides in Russia. This is before, of course, the revolution, and all kinds of isms and the ideas of emancipation in various different forms. Eventually, socialism won the day, but there were all kinds of isms that preceded it, and Jews were at the forefront of pushing all these ideas. You can't blame them, because to a large degree they joined these things because they hoped these things would save them from the anti-Semitism that was going on in Russia. People think of the Holocaust as an isolated event. It's not. It was the crescendo of hundreds of years. And in Russia, it was a normal thing. Every couple of years, there was a pogrom. There was this town was sacked, this one was murdered, that one was this. And it came to a point where it was like we had to think of ideas and ways to get out of it. And in this culture where Zionism is born, all kinds of ideas of secular Jewish ideas that were supposedly going to save Jews from anti-Semitism. So in this age of enlightenment, of Jewish enlightenment and emancipation, this Rebbe Rashab decided to make this yeshiva as a counter, if you will. There were different attitudes. Within the frum world, there's different attitudes. How do you protect the Orthodox population from succumbing to these ideals, and in some prophetic way stop them from falling to communism, both literally falling for the idea of communism, which many Jews did, and then literally succumbing to communism once started abusing Jews. And Rebbe Rashab's idea was to teach Chassidus at a young age. The idea is very simple. If you're going to face the challenges of modernity and ideas of secularism, you need to have some spiritual, intellectual arsenal to be able to push back. That's going to fill the void in your mind that wants these ideas. It used to be before the ideas of emancipation. What do you need to educate a kid for? Just say you know how to do Jewish law. There was nothing threatening him from leaving the fold, that you had to give him some ideas of explanations and answers. In previous times, a similar thing happened in the Spanish Golden Era. You had different Jewish writers a lot of Jewish philosophy emerged from the Spanish Golden Era from that for the same reason, because they were facing what was then the Enlightenment, was like the popularization of Aristotelian and Greek philosophies, that to counter it with Jewish philosophy. So in a similar kind of way, in order to counter the modernity and the secularization that was on its way, that we're still living with today, the response, as it were, from Chabad was to inject in education, not just the education of the technical halachas of how you live as a Jew, but a spiritual education, so that the young man growing up has this spiritual and intellectual fortitude to withstand the various different elements that come their way. And indeed, the results are he was successful. And those who know the history of Jewry in Russia, it was all but decimated, with the exception of Chabad. With the exception of Chabad, there are some other exceptions for small little pockets here and there of Jews who withstood the communist onslaught. But for the most part, it was Chabad that survived the crazy upheaval that went through Russia, and the results are today. The reason why Chabad is so big in Russia is because the moment communism came down, all these little undergrounds popped up and became institutions. They had all the seeds were already planted and fertilized, and it all starts in this yeshiva in Tomchei Temimim, this idea of teaching a generation of young people to be committed to Yiddishkeit, not just technically committed to Yiddishkeit because their parents kept halacha, so they also keep Jewish law, but they have their own spiritual drive because of their systematic learning of Chassidus, that they too can fight the fight of Yiddishkeit. And in a way, that's why I'm here today as a shliach, because of this philosophy of Tomchei Temimim, where you learn Chassidus at a young age, and by the time you graduate yeshiva, the notion of being responsible for Yiddishkeit, that the Rabbi spoke about on Shabbos, is so inculcated that you're going to go out and shluchas, because what else are you going to do? So that's with respect to Chav Cheshvan, and even though you hear about these dates and they're nice dates, someone was born, and not always does it have a relationship to where we are today. So this kind of puts it into perspective, the significance of Rebbe Rashab's leadership and the bearing and the direct result it has on our being here today.
It's 1897.
When he
established it.
The yeshiva, I know it was in
1897.
before Nun Zayin, Tafish Nun Zayin.
Maybe the Stalkus was maybe 1900.
He passed away. He was born in Tafish Mem was in Afrika was born. He passed away in Samach, somewhere there, and also, because he was chased out of, soon after he made the yeshiva, communism came into play. He was thrown out of Lubavitch, he had to run to Rostov, and there he passed away in Rostov. He was chased out of Lubavitch, of the town of Lubavitch, where he first found Tomchei Temimim. There's a famous thing, Asara Gali is Nigalu Tomchei Temimim went through 10 exiles, that they run from town to town to town to town. At one point, they ended up in Kirtinaslav, where his father was thereof, in their running away. But anyway, till eventually they were in Rostov. Okay, so now we're on Kuf Amud Aleph 100a. And we are so if you go to the left-hand side, and you count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 lines down from the wide set of lines, the last word of the line is Mai. So go to the left side, you go to the last word on the line, 6 lines down from the largest set of lines, the last word on the line is Mai. Okay, so the Gemara mentioned earlier, while it was discussing proper respect for the sages, and it mentioned the teaching in the name of Rabbi Zeda, and in response to that teaching, there was an elder fellow who said, "Well done, Yasher Koyach," or Yasher. And then Rabbi Zeda wanted to know if that was considered respectful or not, to which Rabbi Yirmiyah assured him that it was certainly respectful because he was just applauding you for your teaching. So now the Gemara addresses the actual teaching that Rabbi Zeda said, to which the elder responded, "Well done." So what was the teaching? The teaching was that when Mashiach comes, a river will flow. This is the literal meaning. Obviously, this is metaphorical, but the literal teaching is that a river will flow from the Holy of Holies, and it'll provide sustenance for a tree whose fruit will never falter, whose leaves will never whose branches will never wilter, and the leaves, oleo trufa, the leaves will be have medicinal properties. The leaves. No, Rabbi Yechon was the next one. It was about the size of the gates. This is Rabbi Zeda. It's before. It's interesting. The Gemara does the last one first and then the first one. But either way, maybe because Rabbi Yechon is of an earlier generation. So the teaching was that there's going to be this river sustaining this tree or these trees, and the tree is going to have the leaves of the tree will have medicinal properties. So says the Gemara, "Mai v'oleu trufa." What is the nature of these leaves that have medicinal properties. What exactly are the healing that it's going to bring? Again, does it mean literally a river flowing from the Holy of Holies? That would be halachic probably problematic, I think. I can't say for sure, but I don't know. I would assume it means that there's a divine energy that emanates from the Holy of Holies that provides these even physical miracles. I don't see why the physical miracles shouldn't be literal, even if the river is not. But maybe it is. I don't know. So what's the nature of the healing? Rabbi Yitzchak bar Avodimi, Rabbi Yitzchak son of Avodimi, v'Rav Chizda and Rav Chizda were discussing the issue, and Chad Amar one said lahatir, to release. Literally, I'm translating literally, and I'll explain what this means. Lahatir, to release. Peh shel maila, the mouth above. That is to say, someone was a mute. The healing of this leaves will make him capable of speaking. Heal the mouth above in the body. V'chadam, on the other one, Rav Yitzchak bar Avdumi and Rav Chizda are discussing this. One said it's to provide speech to the mute. V'chadam, another said, lahatish peshal mata, to open up the mouth below. What does this mean? So Rashi explains that it is someone who was barren will now be capable of having children. It's quite the miracle. So Itbar Nami, we've been taught as well by other sages who had a similar discussion. Chizkiya said lahater peh ilmin, that the medicinal properties of these leaves that are satiated by the waters of the Holy of Holies is to provide speech for the mute. And Bar Kapara said, Lahate Perakara is to open up the womb of those who have been barren. Okay. Rabbi Yochanan says, the trufa mamish, it's literally medicinal. Well, that doesn't help much. We already knew that it's medicinal. What does this mean? My litrufa. What do you mean by saying that it's just literally medicinal? Or literally the word terufa. So in other words, when Rabbi Yochanan says literally terufa, the Gemara is assuming it doesn't just mean literally medicinal. We knew that already. But literally we have to look at the word terufa and see what the word terufa provides for us. So let's see how the word terufa can help us understand what the medicinal values are of these leaves. So says the Gemara, Rabbi Shmuel bar Nachmani Amar. Rabbi Shmuel bar Nachmani said, L'toyar panim, take the word terufa and divide it into two. You have tar peh, and you add a few letters, you can get toyar panim, which means like, you get toyar peh, which you mean the toyar panim, for the good-looking face, shabali peh, of those who use their mouth. Meaning to say, those who have exerted themselves in the study of Torah, which involves the mouth, they will be granted toyar panim, a shining countenance, in a future time as reward for their exerting themselves in study of Torah. Interestingly,
Was he a prophet?
Sorry?
Was he a prophet?
Who is he? The person speaking?
Yeah.
Oh, they're basing it on a verse, and the verse is a prophecy. The verse is in.
You mean the truth of the Yecheskel?
It's in Yecheskel. But these are sages of the Gemara interpreting that verse, trying to understand, decipher the prophecy. Yeah. So it's interesting to note that the Gemara specifically here, the verse as interpreted specifically refers to those who study Torah as balei peh, those who use their mouth, not balei moyach, those who use their brains, but rather balei peh, those who use their mouth. And in light of what we learned in Tanya the last few weeks on Shabbos, it would make sense. Because over there the Alter Rebbe explains that the coming of Mashiach is dependent on our elevation of the physical world. And therefore there the Alter Rebbe said, even the mitzvah study of Torah, in its proper manner, should be done with the physical mouth. So that the physical energy that's in my body that keeps my mouth alive and makes my mouth moves is elevated to absorb within in godliness, which is the way in which we bring godliness into the physical world. So therefore the Gemara is saying in the reward of Mashiach's coming, it's not just that a person studied Torah using his mind, but balei peh, worked his mouth, meaning to say he brought the godliness of Torah not just into the spiritual part of himself, his mind, but even into his physical body through speech, perhaps.
Also, the Gemara emphasizes the importance of speech. You're not supposed to learn Torah, but just like to your mind, you have to pronounce each word.
It's correct.
You can forget it.
So the Alter Rebbe explaining why that is. Why is it that it's so important to pronounce the words? So that's right. At one level, it's kol ma'er. There's one level. We talked about this in the shir, but one level is kol ma'er kavana, which is when one speaks, it helps with its concentration. The Alter Rebbe takes it even further. The speech itself is of value.
Yeah. Another explanation is when you're forced to put into words, you have to clarify your words.
Yeah.
If you have just an idea is clear to you, but when you want to express it to someone else, you have to make sure your definition.
Sure, the Rebbe Rashab actually, since it's his yard site, since his birthday.
Then when you offer your explanation in words, if someone challenges your explanation, you can discuss it more.
So the Rebbe Rashab, today's Chav Cheshvan, so the Rebbe Rashab has a series of discourses. I think it's 7 or 8 discourses that go in a row, starting. Starts Rosh Hashanah Tov Reish Nun Tes, which is 1899. Sorry. Rosh Hashanah, it goes 7 Maimorim, and there the Rebbe Rashab explains why it is that speech has the capacity to elicit deeper ideas, right? Because when a person thinks of an idea is one thing. When he speaks it out, all of a sudden new things come to his mind. Why is that? If speech is only a recipient of the mind's ideas, so how does the speech have the capacity to elicit more deeper ideas? And he explains, because the lowest level is connected to the highest level. Speech, which is the most physical of expressions, reaches deepest into the person. And he uses this as a model to describe how the physical mitzvah on the lowest level reaches to the highest. So they actually parallel. In other words, the reason why it is that speech has the capacity to help you crystallize things and help you get new ideas is precisely because when you bring the idea, or you bring godliness in this case, to the lowest of realms, the physical body, the physical speech, it reaches to the deepest heights within godliness itself, all connected to this idea. So that encapsulates all of the ideas we're talking about.
So when people are davening and they're not articulating.
So it's not your and I idea. It's not your job or my job to cast judgment on what others are and aren't doing. But as far as my davening goes, I definitely have to make it my business to make sure I'm enunciating is the word, each individual word, certainly.
Especially in the Shema, because sometimes you have words that the last letter and the first letter of the sentence.
Yeah, so actually, if you look in the new Siddur, if you look in the new Siddur, you'll see that they put little lines. They put little lines in the Siddur. In the Shema, you'll see they put little lines in between certain words. And the reason is because the Shulchan Aruch, they put a little line there? Because the Shulchan Aruch writes that anytime there's a word, one word which ends with the same letter that the next word begins, it's just like a small pause, so it doesn't sound like it's one long word. B'chol lavavcha, where I use the same lamed for b'chol, the end of the last word, and for the beginning of the next word. So there's a little, and this you said that they put a little line there to remind you to take a break. So the Shulchan Aruch writes this, b'chol lavavcha, so that's 2 different lameds. Same thing with mem and aleph, because meh and can become one long pronunciation to make a break. You'll see they put a line each time with the Shulchan Aruch system to take a break.
Also the charaf, it shouldn't be the cheraf.
Charaf, because it becomes like one, yeah.
Like it's worse because you mean that now you mix the words, it actually changes the whole
Change the
sentence.
chant, yeah.
Blaspheming Hashem instead of
Just that when I was a kid,
Yeah.
and my uncles were davening, that's all everybody did in those days.
Yeah. Again, it's not your and our job to cast judgment on what others are doing. Our job is to make sure what we do.
I'm questioning whether you've got to articulate.
Yes, you do. It's absolutely have to articulate the words. And we've talked about here also a few times that the idea that we call Amidah, the silent Amidah, is a bit of a misnomer. It should really say the undertone Amidah. It's got to be said audibly. Look in the English translation, the new translation would have the instruction of how to daven properly. It says audibly. The halacha is it to be loud enough that you can hear it in your ears, but low enough that the person next to you doesn't hear it, so you don't interrupt their prayer. There are some Hasidic circles where they actually specifically say everything out loud. Certain Hasidic circles, but not in Chabad. Chabad, they stick to what the Shulchan Aruch says. You say it audibly, so your ears can hear it, but not loud enough to somebody else. So, just to close the Gemara we're talking about here. So we had the Gemara which said that these leaves have medicinal value, and 3 different options. 1, it provides speech to the mute. 2, it'll heal those who have been barren so that they can have children. And number 3 is that those who have invested those who have used their mouth, their physical mouth, in the service of Hashem, to study Torah, will be granted in Mashiach's time, Toyar Panav, a shining countenance. And tomorrow, God willing, we're going to get into more issues of this shining countenance, and God willing, we'll explain a bit more of what this might mean, shining countenance, and why do we care so much if your face looks good or not? Why is that such an important thing? But we'll talk about that, God willing, tomorrow.
In interesting, the whole idea of walking God's ways and to be in the Tzelem and Demut of God. The whole idea was to, in the same way that God created the entire universe with words, that began the words are actually, in the same way they found out, I mean, reading this years ago, that each planet, by the way, has a different note. And there's a chord that they now hear through a microphone and NASA. It's an echo of the universe. It's like the glue of the universe.
You know, it's funny when you think of it conventionally, you think of that which you can touch is most real. That which and as you elevate farther away from touch, like you get to a speech, you get to a thought, you get to an idea, you get to a feeling, you think of it as less and less real, as it were, right? If you read the Baal Shem Tov's readings, just Baal Shem Tov stuff itself, as cryptic as the messages might be, without any Hasidic Chabad interpretations, just the Baal Shem Tov's teachings, you get I don't remember that he says it explicitly, but you get the idea that's actually quite the reverse. That your thoughts are much more real than your speech, and which are much more real than your touching, mm-hmm. Because from the perspective of, we talked about like the divine energy starts off in an infinite place and has to be slowly contracted so it fits into the physical world, which means the more it says I am, that means the farther it is away, or the more it conceals the truth that God's the only reality. So the more tangible it is, and the more it says I exist, which means it's more concealing the truth. Mm-hmm. The less you sense of I am, the closer you are to the Eibishter. So in fact, your speech is more real in a sense than the touching, and your thoughts are even more real, and your feelings and ideas, in other words, ideas are more real than the physical manifestation of the ideas from that perspective, if you will. So this idea, which is why you see in the Baal Shem Tov's writings, every word is an avodah. Every word it says is serving Hashem. Every word, good morning. Every word, every thought is a serving of Hashem. That's one of his famous lines. Right. The place where a person puts his thought, that's where he is. In other words, what makes you physically here? Because your flesh and bones are sitting on this chair. Therefore, I'm here. If my thoughts are somewhere else, then I'm really there. It's only the distant physical world that says I'm in this place, but my spiritual self, my real self, is saying I'm somewhere else because of my thoughts. So in a way, there's even more truth and weight to what I say and think than more than what I do in a certain way, because it has more truth in that sense. Conversely, as we were saying today, that the purpose ultimately is to bring godliness into the physical. And thus the Gemara says, not the one who thinks Torah, but one who speaks Torah gets this reward. Because the ultimate is to infuse the physical, the touch with the world of the senses, the world of the physical, infuse that with the spiritual through thought, by thinking, having proper intention when I eat. Now I've infused in my physical the spiritual idea, as we've been discussing in our Tanya Shur in the last few weeks.
The vibration of each word, in and of itself, the very vibration that we bring, is in itself that which is enshrined and ingrained in the human imprint. As a result,
sure.
As a result, that's exactly.
It doesn't stop existing.
Exactly.
Yeah, it doesn't stop existing. Now you can even say physically that nothing you say stops existing.
Yeah,
quite literally.
Kabbalah is brought to the whole idea of the vibration with the creation of each word. So each word we say, God, in the same way that was said that by Ramban, that we should put